So let me just have the pleasure of saying good morning first, and asking for dispensation from the governor for not wearing a tie. All right?
You got it.
I figured I was okay if he was okay without wearing a tie.
It's July, guys.
It's July and Friday, but on a more serious note, I want to thank. You always look sharp. Staff's from too, since we're in his district. It's a lawyer thing. It's not a billable hour.
Lawyers wear ties.
If we could switch, though, I think this is a very, it's an important few minutes or some time here in Bridgeport, and I want to take the opportunity to turn to a serious tone to thank the governor, the lieutenant governor, our fighting attorney general, Secretary of State is here too, I think. Denise?
On her way.
She's on her way. Our U.S. Senator who's fighting for us, Dick Blumenthal is fighting for us down in Washington. All of our state reps that I know the lieutenant governor is going to introduce in a minute, and locally city council members. And we will, in the city of Bridgeport, welcome all here on this important topic, not just as elected officials, but as residents on behalf of all that live or call Bridgeport home. And we thank the leadership and the courage that we've had by our state officials and by our federal officials on this important topic about what's happening. We hear these rumblings, especially now out of Washington. You never know whether they're rumor or they're real. But I suspect the governor, you're here because we're concerned. All of us as elected officials are concerned about how our residents might be treated, and that we're going to stand up for them, united on every front. I will turn it over in a second because I think there's important things to be said by others. But I want to let you know in Bridgeport, along with members of the City Council, some who are here, and I'll acknowledge them, Jeanette Herron, Ernie Newton, Denise Taylor-Moy, and our City Clerk, Lydia Martinez, worked hard some time ago so that locally we can make a statement and be in solidarity with others on a state and on a national level. We passed a resolution that in substance says that we resolve that the mayor and the city council declare that Bridgeport's a welcoming city that is committed to protecting all residents, regardless of their race, gender, nationality, religion, religious orientation, or immigration status, in compliance with federal law. And we feel very strongly about that we on a local level work in partnership to protect all of our residents. We care about every resident, everyone who calls this city home, regardless of how others might view them. We have an obligation, we believe, to protect them, and we'll continue to do that. Before I turn it over to our distinguished Lieutenant Governor, we talked before, and I want you to know, as much as this is a state issue, it's of course a national issue. We've partnered with cities across the country. Some time ago, I was in El Paso with mayors. Recently, I was with mayors across the country. This has been a topic for urban centers all across America. And as cities, I think it's fair to say, who have some of the largest populations that are being challenged by policies or whatever you might call it out of Washington, that we stand united as well. And with that, for her hard work and for her leadership as well, if you could, with a round of applause, take and introduce our Lieutenant Governor.
Oh, thank you. Mayor Ganim, thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership on this important issue, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge members of the Bridgeport legislative delegation. We have Senator Marilyn Moore joining us today. We have Representative Steve Staffstrom joining us, and also Representative Jack Hennessy. We appreciate all their good work in the state legislature. And Representative Antonio Felipe, thank you for coming, sir. So with that, I want to thank everyone for coming, from ICE raids to separating families at the border, locking children in cages, and weaponizing the census. The Trump administration has created a climate of fear across our country in immigrant communities and communities of color here in Connecticut. While President Trump yesterday backed down from his threat to include a citizenship question on the 2020 census in order to manipulate the census for political purposes, the damage is done, and we have a lot of work to do to undo that damage. The Trump administration has deliberately tried to drive down turnout and participation in the census. and he's trying to rob resources and political representation in our immigrant and in our communities of color. This presents a continuing challenge of trying to educate people across the state that the census is in fact safe. The stakes for the 2020 census are very high for Connecticut, and that's why our Complete Count Committee that is co-chaired by Representative Chris Rosario, who is not here, but we really appreciate his efforts. We are going to redouble our outreach efforts to ensure that everyone in our state is counted, including those hard-to-count communities, which includes Bridgeport. Following yesterday's executive order, we continue to be very alarmed and disturbed by the president's use of the power of information held by federal agencies as a tactic to intimidate, to incite fear in our state and across the country. And of course, today that fear is felt even more with the threat of the ICE raids that we are here to talk about. And so with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Claudia Connor. Claudia is the CEO and president of the Connecticut Institute for Refugees and Immigrants. Claudia.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to the governor, the lieutenant governor for your remarks, to the attorney general, to Senator Blumenthal, Mayor Ganem. And I also want to say that we are, very importantly, we are here joined together with Make the Road, with Connecticut Students for a Dream, with the Boroughs Community Center, because it is really at the community level that the impact of these policies is truly felt. So at the Connecticut Institute for Refugees and Immigrants, our mission is to work with immigrants and refugees, survivors of torture and survivors of human trafficking across the state of Connecticut. And all of the policies that we are seeing, all of the tactics are having a dire, immediate, and will have a long-term effect on the people that we serve. We are seeing the systematic dismantling of the refugee resettlement program at a time when there is an unprecedented global displacement of over 70 million people worldwide. We see an utter disregard for the existing legal precedent that has been in place for many years, including with the executive order last night, which used that tool as a way to do an end run around litigation that did not go in the administration's favor. And we see, as has been said, an escalation of tactics on the part of ICE and Homeland Security to target people who are foreign-born, yes, criminals, no, flight risk, no. So there are three specific things that we today would like to call out. One is the use of detention as an immigration enforcement strategy, which has exponentially increased and has made immigrants across the board, including lawful permanent residents and asylum seekers, impacting them for longer periods of time and denying them the rule of law, due process, and other things to which they are entitled. The government is spending millions of dollars to lock up people whose detentions serve absolutely no purpose. In addition to being cruel and unnecessary, prolonged immigration detention makes it nearly impossible for individuals to fight their cases here in the United States. And as a former prisoners' rights attorney, I can tell you that prisoners have more rights than immigrants right now in America. In May, over 144,000 people seeking refuge in the United States were put into detention on the border. The degrading and inhumane conditions in those detention facilities are unacceptable and morally reprehensible. And it is deplorable that the United States is holding people in conditions where they are deprived of their very basic human needs. And there are comments coming out that it is tantamount to torture, both psychological, emotional, and physical torture. The citizenship question, as the Lieutenant Governor said, the President did back off trying to get that into the census for 2020, but the executive order that came out at about 11 o'clock last night basically does use information and calls upon agencies, upon many agencies, including the Social Security Administration, to turn over information to the Commerce Department. The executive order assures people that it will maintain the confidentiality of that information, but I think there is ample evidence that what the administration has done makes that an absolutely false claim of assurance, and that we cannot have confidence in that. With regard to the ICE raids, they reportedly have already started in Southern California, and while Connecticut, no cities in Connecticut are among the cities that have been stated as targets for this Sunday, we do at CRE share the concern that in an environment that is already fraught with incredible anti-immigrant activity and sentiment, that this ratchets up the level of fear among our clients to a very, very high degree. Individuals are afraid that they are, if they are deported, that their children who are American citizens will be left behind. There is absolutely no plan in place for how those children will be taken care of. This impacts our clients right away, immediately. So we keep saying, and we have said, that this is not who we are as Americans, and I truly believe that. Nonetheless, and tragically, that is how things are right now, and we must keep raising our voices like this, reach across sectors to stand together with others who seek justice and are committed to human rights. And this is not a time to fall prey to division and internal discord. It's a time to stand together, stand united, and stand in solidarity with all who are at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. The next person I'd like to introduce is Dr. Sobi Song. Dr. Sobi Song is the leader of King's Class Family Chapel Worldwide to talk about his personal experience. Dr. Song.
Good afternoon. Greetings to the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, the Senators, the reps, and distinguished personality. I want to really appreciate everyone here this afternoon. It's so emotional for me. As someone looking for safety and peace, you know, the greatest thing that somebody can have in life is an assurance of freedom, which it is beyond what money can buy. I came to Connecticut 2016 September, and because of fear of persecution from my home country, and I was just looking for a way to be free to live as a human being, to be able to reach out and touch lives. And Connecticut has been a great home for me, and because they provided me the ability to meet people which can care. Siri has really helped me to stand, though in this period of uncertainty when you don't know what will be the outcome, fear of going back home where you can't call home, and also being in a place where you feel that it's going to be home, but when you get to the television, hear the news about impending raids and all this, it adds more fear, you know, when you think that you're leaving that area of fear and then coming somewhere that you can be helped, and then it's as if you're being driven again back to where you're running from. And it's a painful life to live, always sleeping with uncertainty, sleeping with fear, sleeping with, you know, you're not free to, no matter how good you have and you have to do, you will not be able to do it to the best of your knowledge. But Connecticut has been a blessing to me because my stay here this 3 years now, I've been able to reach out to also the less privileged, because I see that what I get from the state, I should be able to put back. And I'm trying with the church, which I'm leading also to reach out to the less privileged. Though I also have my fear, but I think that just looking at the good work that the governors, the lieutenant governor, the senator, I usually watch you on TV. I'm so happy I can see you today. It's a dream come true. I can see, I've been watching all of you on TV, and today I'm standing here. I'm not standing for myself. I'm standing on behalf of the refugee community, the immigrants, which their fear is just that they don't know what's going to happen when they hear all this news. And I want to plead on behalf of them, whatever this great state, you've been doing so much. It's just much that you've done that asking is as if we are not grateful. And I usually tell my lawyer that no matter the outcome, for the fact that I was in Connecticut for these 3 years, whatever happens after now, even if I'm not going to be able to leave again, I would think that probably Connecticut did something great. At least they gave me an opportunity to touch one life for the short time I was here. I want to thank you on behalf of the immigrant community, the refugees, and may you keep doing the good work. And I know that Connecticut will only go from glory to glory. God bless you and God keep you. Thank you very much. Originally, I'm from Cameroon. Cameroon is a bilingual country which is undergoing some persecution now.
We want to just, for all of our members of the media, to know that Dr. Sobi Song is from the Cameroon.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And there's a civil war going on in Cameroon right now that needs to be addressed.
Thank you so much for that. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Representative Steve Staffstrom, who is a co-chair of our Legislative Judiciary Committee and was one of the key authors and sponsors of the Trust Act in Connecticut. Representative Staffstrom.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, Governor, Senator, everyone for coming down to Bridgeport today to mark what is really a critically important issue. And I'm so happy to hear Dr. Song's words about how he has felt welcomed and respected here in Connecticut. And that's the message we want to get out of this room today, is that Connecticut is a state that welcomes and respects its refugees and its immigrants. We as elected officials hear all the time, constantly, especially those of us who represent a city like Bridgeport, about the struggle of immigrants living in our community. Be it an individual who I spoke about on the House floor in bringing out the Trust Act, who was a construction worker, had an unfortunate accident, had one of the side effects of which was suffered from seizures. He ended up having a car accident on the ride home and fled the scene in panic and in fear. Was charged with leaving the scene of an accident, sentenced to 2 years of probation. First run-in with the law, faithfully abided by all of the conditions of his probation, showed up at his very last probation hearing, and ICE was standing there waiting for him. I met with a constituent a couple weeks ago who was an honor student at Fairfield U. Her sister is a scholar athlete at UConn. They own a 4-family house here in the south end of Bridgeport, and he was recently deported after being in the United States for well over 20 years, picked up in an immigration raid. These are the stories we hear time and time again, and they are happening here in the state of Connecticut right now. And we took an important step here in Connecticut again this year. Connecticut has always been a leader in standing up for immigrants and refugees. We were the first state in the nation to pass the Trust Act, which placed limits on the ability of law enforcement, both local and state, to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. Federal immigration authorities want to run around, they want to break up families, they want to put children in cages, so be it. But you know what? Connecticut is not going to cooperate. Connecticut is not going to participate in that. We were the first state in the nation to say that back in 2013, and we did so on a bipartisan, unanimous basis in both chambers of the legislature. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, we've found several loopholes in that law, including some of the examples I just cited. And we took steps this year to close those loopholes. And I'm proud to say that the Democratic Party in the state, under the leadership of our governor, led the way in strengthening that law and putting back in place probably the strictest trust act in the nation and the strictest limits on when our local and state law enforcement will cooperate with federal immigration authorities. These situations are very, very rare. They should be very, very rare. And we want immigrants to know they're respected and welcome here in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce a fighter at the federal level against these very unfair and unjust policies, our United States Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Thank you. First, thanks to Steve Stastrom and our Connecticut legislature and the leaders who are here today, Governor, Lieutenant Governor William Tong, our Attorney General, and all of the elected leaders, locally and state. This picture says 1,000 words. This picture is of Connecticut standing strong in solidarity with innocent people who may be swept up and arrested in massive raids across the country beginning in the next few days. And this picture says to them, you are not alone. You are not alone. We will stand with you because we recognize that many of you have been here for decades, working hard, playing by the rules, paying taxes, raising families. And this policy of massive sweeps and arrests is part of a family separation policy that will take away your breadwinners, community contributors, and send them away from children and families who need them here. It is a family separation policy across the nation, not just at the border. This policy can be summarized in 2 words: fear and cruelty. Fear and cruelty. From the very start, this administration has embarked on a policy of fear and cruelty to deter asylum seekers fleeing persecution from coming to this country, to deter immigrants in this country from exercising their legal rights, to discourage families from giving their children the kinds of help and services they deserve. Yesterday, I introduced, and today I'm announcing, legislation that I hope will be expedited to embody in federal law protections against sweeps affecting sensitive location. The policy of this administration, as past administrations, is supposed to be that there can be no arrests in churches, schools, doctors' offices, courthouses, and other sensitive locations. We want to give that policy some real teeth and enforcement authority. 13 of my colleagues have joined me in introducing this legislation. I challenge the United States Congress to protect those locations from these massive sweeps and arrests so that fear and cruelty will not be on us. They will not be on our watch. They will not be our responsibility. And to the immigrant families who may be affected by these massive sweeps, you should know you have rights. Don't say anything, don't sign anything until you talk to a lawyer. And if you are in a place of worship or a doctor's office or a courthouse or a police station, you cannot be arrested. We want to make that law not just policy. We want to give it enforcement authority. And finally, let me just say that over the last 2 or 3 years, I've stood with many of these families who have already been arrested, some deported. It is heartbreaking and gut-wrenching to see men and women who simply missed a court date or got bad advice from their lawyers, often without any intent on their part to evade the law, be swept up in a system that gives them no recourse. They deserve a day in court before they are sent out of the country, away from their families and children. So I want to thank our leadership who are here today for standing strong and speaking out, as all Americans should do in the face of this massive injustice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Blumenthal. It is my pleasure to introduce a fighter for Connecticut and a protector of civil rights for everyone in our state, our Attorney General William Tong.
Thank you, Madam Lieutenant Governor. Thank you all for being here today. Those of us who have the opportunity to serve all of you deal with some pretty tough issues, and we see some ugly things day to day. But nothing prepares you for that image that we saw a couple of weeks ago of a father lying in a river, the Rio Grande, next to his daughter. Both dead, both the product of a panic caused by the President of the United States and, as Senator Blumenthal, a policy fueled by fear and cruelty that is utterly pointless. And so we're here today to say that we stand with all the immigrant families of this state and this country, but also to say that all of us are linking arms together, I've said it many times, as a firewall, because we are here to protect and defend every family here in Connecticut, including our immigrant families here in Connecticut. And we do that because, as I look around this room, Senator Blumenthal said, this picture says 1,000 words. Well, I see the Martinez family standing right here. I see the Bysiewicz family from Greece and Poland, the Ganem family from Lebanon. Senator Blumenthal and I both have the honor of having served and now serving as attorneys general for this state. We are both the sons of immigrant fathers. So we are here not just to protect immigrant families, we're here to protect our own families, because this is who we are as a state and as a country. And so let me just say what we're going to do here in the state of Connecticut, working with the governor. The governor is going to issue guidance to state agencies, state departments, state officials, state police, state and local law enforcement about their obligations to follow the law and the Trust Act as written by Representative Staffstrom and the legislature, and not to cooperate with an unlawful and unjust system of immigration enforcement, and not to be co-opted by the federal government. State and local law enforcement need to do their jobs, not the job of the federal government. That's number one. Number two is we're going to work with our partners like SERI. 32BJ, I think, is represented here today, SEIU. We're going to work with our partners. We don't have the ability to represent individuals, but we can help. And the Attorney General's office will do everything we can to help individuals in their individual cases through our partners in the community and through their lawyers. We're going to take legal action whenever possible. If you wanted to know why the Attorney General's office needs a civil rights department, this is why. And we're working with our multi-state partners in New York and in Massachusetts and across the country, and we will take action against the President of the United States whenever and however we can. Let me just close by saying we have 200 lawyers in the Attorney General's office, 315 total staff. We are ready to do everything we can to protect and defend Connecticut's families. And working with the Lieutenant Governor, yesterday we saw the President of the United States stand there and concede that there will be no question about citizenship on the census. He lost. He lost because Connecticut partnered with New York and many other states as lead plaintiffs, took on the President of the United States, and we beat him. And if we hang together, as we are today, we will beat him again. Thank you.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce our fearless leader of Connecticut, Governor Ned Lamont.
Look, I'm just reminded, listening to these eloquent tributes, Gordy, you're right. This is not America. These are not our values. Mass deportations is the opposite of what America is all about. And Dr. Song, we're proud that you call America home. I'm particularly proud that you call Connecticut home. And as Joe and Steve and Marilyn and others would say, you know, we are a welcoming city here in Bridgeport, and we are a welcoming state. And that's what makes America a shining city on a hill. And we're not going to let anybody in Washington compromise that. And a lot of the words you hear out of Washington maybe pass by, but a lot of them are dog whistles. You know, to me, it started out when you know who started challenging the birth certificate of the President of the United States, Barack Obama. And that was a signal. That was a signal that you are not like us. You are not really one of us. Really? Citizenship, as Susan would say. You know, what's the matter with finding out who's a citizen? Well, it deters and discourages and scares people afraid to participate in a census when they hear that. You know, I was struck a year ago when campaigning that at that point you began to see the separation of kids from their mothers, kids from their family, the beginning of what has turned into be a horrific nightmare for our country. And I think as governor, how does this, you know, impact us right here, you know? Dick and William, they're going to be fighting the good fight down in Washington, fighting the laws, protecting us every way we can. But it hit home for me when I met a number of teachers and folks in the immigration community who pointed out after all that press a year ago about kids in cages and separation from their parents, a lot of children of color stopped going to school for a few days or a week. And Hispanic kids were asking their mothers, really, is it safe for me to be going? Maybe I can just stay home for a few days. And that is the dog whistle that is so un-American. And that's why we're standing up today in our own modest way, making it easier for parents to know what to expect, what to plan. You know, Dick and William will tell them what your rights are standing up. And Susan and I and the political leadership here are going to be here every day reminding you we're proud to call you our fellow Connecticut nutmeggers. We're proud that you're here. We're proud that you're going to our schools. We want you to go on to UConn. We want you to start up a family here. And that's why we're all here today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So thank you to all of our speakers, and we are appreciative that so many of the media are here, and any of us would be happy to take your questions, if there are any.
I have some questions. Maybe Representative Stasham would be best to answer this. So in Chicago, the mayor, in response to these ICE raids, decided to block ICE from accessing police databases. Wondering if you can describe what kind of access ICE has to our Connecticut databases and whether you are thinking about steps to limit such access.
Yeah, so we actually had this issue come up not too long ago with certain police departments in the state sharing license plate reader data with ICE. And it's my reading of the Trust Act as amended this year that practice should stop. It should stop immediately. And I guess the Attorney General could probably opine on this better than I can, but when you're sharing data or you're holding someone past the period at which they would otherwise be able to be released without a judicial warrant, which is what the new Trust Act requires, is basically local and state law enforcement will not hold someone past the time they would otherwise be eligible to leave incarceration without it being backed by a judicial warrant. You're already subjecting yourself to potential liability, and you're subjecting your municipality to liability. So if you've got that rogue cop out there, that rogue probation officer who says, you know what, I have my own personal political beliefs, and I'm going to go ahead and call ICE despite what the law is telling me to do, despite what the state of Connecticut has. You are putting your municipality, you're putting your state agency at legal risk for constitutional challenge, and that is exactly the reason why it was so important for us to make sure we got the Trust Act done this year in order to protect our municipalities, just as we are also protecting immigrants and refugees living within our state.
A follow-up. The changes that you made to the Trust Act, just a month or so ago, have those taken effect yet? And if so, what sort of information or data do we have about the impact that has had on ICE workers?
Yes, so most of the provisions of that law take effect October 1, but as I said, I think what we've done is we highlighted through the debate this year that right now there is legal risk. There's absolute legal risk to a municipality who holds someone past the period at which they would otherwise be eligible for release. And I suspect you've started seeing court challenges to that around the nation. We haven't yet in Connecticut. We're hoping to head that off by getting the word out about the changes we've made in the Trust Act. Also, come January 1 of 2020, we've put in place reporting requirements whereby any state or local law enforcement agency that cooperates with ICE needs to provide a report on a monthly basis back to OPM. That data will be shared with the governor's office and also with the leadership of the Judiciary Committee, and it will be made public.
Yes, are you a member of the media? Yep. Oh, you had a question.
I run the youth soccer league for the kids in Bridgeport, and when the president started to create the atmosphere of fear, our number of kids decreased by 50%. Not only are we preventing children from having the right to play, or even perhaps training a future Megan or a future Morgan or a future Alyssa, we are keeping kids isolated. I would just like to ask if public parks could be part of the sensitive areas so kids can come out and play their games.
They should be regarded as part of educational activities and institutions. If you look at the policies, they are very wide in their coverage, including educational, medical, religious, other kinds of services. For example, it's not just places of worship, it's institutions and areas associated with religious institutions that are, in effect, immune from ICE trampling people's rights. But the point is, we need to speak up, and the immigrant community should speak up, because as long as ICE thinks they can get away with it, they may well do it.
Thank you. And I do want to add, before we take other questions, that Governor Lamont and I want families who are concerned in Connecticut to know that if you have a concern about an ICE raid, we encourage you to utilize Connecticut's Family Preparedness Plan, which contains resources to ensure that children are safe and cared for in the event of detainment or deportation. And you can visit ct.gov family preparedness. And ma'am, could you just please say your name so that the journalists know who you are?
Edie Cassidy. I live right down the street.
Thank you, Edie. Yes.
Not a member of the press, but just to share a piece of information. Globally, there will be almost 780 vigils held in the name of decency and compassion, 20 of which will be occurring in the state of Connecticut, one of which will be in Bridgeport today, in Fairfield and Westport. And if you have an interest in joining with fellow citizens in the name of all the right things that this country was founded on, you can go to the website lightsforliberty.org, and that will tell you where there's a vigil in Connecticut today.
Thank you. Emily?
So in 2018, we saw increases in the number of ICE arrests and removal orders across New England. I was wondering if you have any Connecticut-specific data about that for 2019. What are our most recent numbers about how active ICE has been here in the state?
We're going to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Anyone else?
We can try to get it for you as well if it's available in Washington.
Thank you, Senator. Also, this year, one of the steps that the Connecticut legislature did not take was it did not change the length of a misdemeanor from 365 days to 364, affecting deportations. And in addition, it was unable to pass legislation providing legal assistance to undocumented immigrants in their removal proceedings. And I'm wondering, Governor, if you think action should be taken on these issues prior to the next legislative session. Should your office take a step now?
Look, action should be taken on these issues. I'm disappointed it wasn't taken care of during the regular session. I've learned I've got to work with legislative leadership in terms of what we do going forward, but we will take care of this.
Thank you, everybody.
They can